to another edition of Shed Talk, my weekly magazine video series looking at the keeping, breeding and showing of cage birds, with a particular focus as usual on the exhibition style budgerigar. And indeed, as promised in the previous episode, in this episode we are going to get the birds that are behind me, so the youngest of the young birds, I think I said in the last episode. We're going to get those out, just run them through the show cage and have a quick look and see how they are developing, and maybe see if we can identify those that are likely to be keepers at this stage of the year. Before I do that though, what I thought I would do is just do a very quick update for you on cage number 6, where we had the two youngsters. Well, I am pleased to say that currently, as it stands, the cage number 6 is going okay. I have now removed the cockbird from there. I just didn't want him going back down again. And he is now back in the main flight, where I keep all of the birds that are currently in my breeding team. And of course, we will be doing another sort out shortly. So some of those will definitely change, I think, just to try and get some of those younger birds into there. So we'll have a look at that, but we'll have a look at that in a future episode. So he's back in there. Mum is now bringing these two up on her own. I have removed the nest box and obviously closed up that door, so she isn't likely to go back in there and start laying again. And probably, as you can gather from that, the final of the two chicks, the Opaline chick, has jumped the nest box and is out. And actually it was, I think we saw in the last episode the length of the tail between the two. It's definitely the older of the birds, because it came out and just started perching straight away, whereas the normal green is still on the bottom of the cage at the moment. I'm hoping it's going to be okay. There's no sign that Mum's not feeding it or anything, but it is very lethargic, shall I say. It just sits there. It might just be that when I'm in here it is very nervous. There is a chick hide in the cage, but it's not using it. So I am obviously having to keep an eye on it, making sure that it is being fed. But hopefully Mum will continue to feed it well, because it is without doubt the better of the two chicks. And as always, the better of the two chicks is the one that, if we're going to lose one of them, it would be that one, wouldn't it? Right, so that is that cage, all going reasonably well in there. They've probably got about another week, 2 weeks before they're fully weaned, and then I can think about moving the mum back into the main flight, and we can pop the two chicks into one of the nursery cages, and I can get that cage clean. You may notice throughout this video that the behind me changes a little bit if I'm stood over this side, because I'm gradually getting the cages out and giving them a clean. Right, having said that, it's time to get some of the young birds out of that nursery flight and take a quick look at them. So this bird then is a yellowface blue, as I'm sure you can see. Mutant 1 would be my guess, judging from the lack of green in the body and the dullness of the yellow in the face. So this bird then, in terms of overall, I wouldn't say it was the greatest of birds, particularly as it's a cockbird. It's got reasonable length to it, but just see if I can get him to move across the perch a little bit. Reasonable length to it, but doesn't, even when it's in the nappy flight, it doesn't stand particularly well. It does tend to do what it's doing now, which is leaning right across the perch, and I know the tail is on the other perch. I'll see if I can Just get him back up on the perch. There we go. I'm standing a little bit better now, a little bit more proud. But again, considering how old this bird is, it is one of the older birds that we're looking at today. It's not massive, and for a cock bird it lacks that bit across the eyes, doesn't it? Not much blow over the top of the head, and if you look at the spots when he's looking at us, he doesn't have very many spots, and we looked at a couple that have just come out of the nest box that have got really nice big spots. So overall, my guess is that this is not going to be a bird that I would want to keep particularly, but we will have to wait and see how he goes, how he develops, or if he develops any better. I think I've upset him now, haven't I, by trying to get him to move across the perch. He was quite settled in the cage initially. Hopefully now with that paddle in the bottom to distract him a little bit, he'll stop climbing, but maybe not. I'll just move out of the way a little bit, see if he'll settle a bit more. Sort of is. So redeeming features, doesn't have the hinged tail too much, holds his wing carriage quite well. Quite a broad bird across the shoulder, but narrow. I'm trying to do redeeming features here, I know, but narrow across the top of the head, no width between the eyes. And I think it's the head on this bird that really does let him down. You know, lack of spots, no depth of mask, no width between the eyes, no blow over the top for a cock bird. So I'm guessing this bird is, like I said earlier, is going to be one that will go in the sales cage, I think. Might be useful for somebody. But I think I've got plenty of cock birds for next year that are better than him. Although, you know, it might well be that when we come to do the assessment, he comes out a little bit higher. As always, thoughts on this bird? As I look at him a bit now, there is a little bit of change in the blue across the directly below the mask. I still think he's a mutant one, but you'll have to let me know your thoughts on that, particularly those who are better with the yellow faces than I am. See if I can get him to come back onto the perch again. There you go. Right, that's the yellow face blue looked at. So we've now got a cobalt or possibly a violet. Looking at the back, looking at what's between the wings, it looks more violet than cobalt, but still a bit unclear. So this bird then, as you can probably see, really is going through the molt at the moment. So looks very scruffy. There's loads of pin feathers. We'll deal with the obvious fault first of all. He does appear like he might well be flecked, even though it's not very much. And I think I said it in the last episode, flecking is a major fault when it comes to the UK. So it's not something you really want to have in your shed. I've got a few birds, or a couple of birds that sort of show it, but I tend to try not to breed with them too much. Yeah, I try not to tend to breed with them too much, if at all. So that's the obvious fault with this bird. So I said he's going through the molt, and you can see that he doesn't have a complete tail. The tail is coming back down again, which is always good news, good to see. I'll see if I can just get him to turn around a bit. This bird has got a really nice long depth of mask, and you can probably see on him he's going to have some quite nice spots if he looks at the camera. See if I can get him attracted with my hand. So he's going to have some quite nice spots. Not the biggest of birds. It's difficult to tell from when we're looking at him at the moment because of his very poor standing in the show cage. But he isn't the biggest of birds. He's not got the greatest width across the shoulders. He does have a little bit more between the eyes than some of the birds. Again, I'll put the paddle in and see if that distracts him enough to sit up a bit more. Become really interested in it now, hasn't he, rather than standing up. So it is a cock bird, like I said. Get rid of it again and I'll see if that helps. Not much. I think I'm going to have to assess this one again because I quite like the spots, and there's a bit about the top of the head that as it's molting is the problem I've got with the top of the head at the moment, just so you know, is that there are a lot of pin feathers in there, so he's not showing the amount of glow that he will have when all of those feathers are out, and it's also unclear how much ticking there will be until those feathers are out. So it's difficult to assess this bird at the moment in terms of that both the ticking and the top of the head. So I will have to, I think this bird is going to have to wait until the September. So it's not a bird I'm going to get rid of in a hurry, but mainly because of the mask and spots. But he's not the biggest of birds, is he? No, still unsure. Like I say, we will wait. And we'll also have to go back through pedigree, because I do like the family this bird is offered, so it might well be that will mean it will be a keeper just because of his background. Let's see how this one develops. I'll stand clear again and you can have a look at him. So, Cobalt stroke violet, normal. So the bird we're looking at now is a normal light green, so I'm sure you can see, a cock bird. So quite a largest bird, and if we have a look at him, if he does settle a little bit in the cage, I'll just give him a few seconds. So quite a biggish bird. Stands reasonably well on the perch, although does tend to drop the tail a little bit. I think you can see that. Wing carriage is reasonable from what I can see. I just need him to set a little bit so we can get a reasonable look at him. So like I say, fairly tallish bird, and main redeeming feature on this bird is the mask, isn't it? If we have a look at his mask, it's very nice and deep. No sign of it being split that I can see. see if we can put the paddle in again for this bird and see if that will distract him a little bit. Maybe not. There we go. So like I say, main redeeming feature is the mask. Spots aren't brilliant at the moment, but they've still got time to develop those. I think these are still, well, I was going to say baby spots, but I'm not totally convinced they all are, but there is still time. We'll have to wait and see how those develop. In terms of width between the eye, it's not massive, but it's not terrible either. It doesn't look, the bird doesn't look too pointy. I mean, it has a little bit of pointiness about him, but it's not, doesn't look too pointy. It has got quite a bit of blow when he tries, but again, not the greatest across the head. So this is one of those in-between birds, I think, from my point of view, where he may not quite have enough, but might make a reasonable stock bird. His stance isn't brilliant. He stands with his legs quite close together, which means that he gives the impression of lacking that extra bit of power. I prefer a bird with quite a wide stance. There's a little bit of crossing of the wings as well, which may just be the way he's standing. Tail doesn't droop too much, a little bit, but not massively. It's got a reasonable straight back, although at the moment when I look at him now, there is that little bit of a hinged tail. In terms of the line across the front of the body, it's reasonably nice and broad at the top and narrow at the bottom, so he doesn't have a big belly on him, doesn't look like a fife. Yeah, I think if anything this would be a stock bird rather than a show bird, and if he's going to be kept it would be probably for his mask and maybe just for the extra length that he's got, but we'll have to see how he grows on over the next couple of months. See how he looks when we come to look at him in September. If you look at the mask, between the eyes, there is a little bit of directional feather coming down, but not massively. But again, a fairly biggish bird. We will just need to keep an eye on him. Right, I'll move out the way again as I did before and just see whether he settles, so you can get a better look at him. See, when he's standing like that, he looks not too bad, doesn't he? Could do with probably about another few centimetres in terms of length, but he has still got some growing to do, I would guess. Yeah, probably a stock bird, and probably will just be a keeper. Right, a reasonable little, light green. And this bird then, I think you can probably easily see, is a normal green cockbird, so normal light green cockbird. Not the steadiest bird in the show cage. In terms of its overall stance, I suppose what we're talking about, it does lean a little bit across the perch. As I'm talking about him, he's getting a little bit more agitated. Again, I'll try and walk away from the bird so that he's focusing less on me. Yeah, it does lean. It's not got quite the upright stance that I'm looking for. It's a little bit across the perch. So with that in mind, you might remember I've said it a few times that I'm trying to get that better style into my bird in terms of the way they look, the back line, the stance, how upright they are. So So not the greatest in terms of the its uprightness, but it does have a nice straight back. There's no sign of the hinged tail on this particular cockbird. It's not the biggest of birds, I would say. It's quite a narrow and quite a short bird, particularly for some of my cockbirds. It does have a nice deep mask. In terms of the spots, I think it's still got its baby spots at the moment. Yeah, it has still got its baby spots at the moment. But they don't look like they're going to be the biggest of spots, but we will have to wait and see once it's gone through into its adult molt, see what they look like. I mean, they're not terrible. I don't think they're going to be terrible spots, but they're certainly not going to be massive. In terms of blow for the cockbird, he has a little bit across the top of the head. Again, not massive. He doesn't have a massive amount of rise. Little bit of width between the eyes. I'll see if I can get, there you can see him looking at the camera now, I hope. So you can see there's a little bit of width between the eyes, a little bit of directional feathering, but not massive amount. Wing carriage is okay, it's not poor. I can't see the signs of the hinged tail, which is always a good thing for my birds. So it's one of the features that I'm desperately trying to breed out of them. Standing a little bit better now, isn't he? Now he's relaxing a little bit. Guarantee now I've said that he's relaxing a little bit, he'll start climbing all over the cage again. There you go. Right, I'll move away once more. So if I was to talk about his better points, I suppose straight back, depth of mask, wing carriage are all reasonable. Could do with being a bit bigger. Still got a bit of growing to do though, don't forget. Still only a young bird. So we'll have a little bit of growing to do. Just going to put the paddle in and see if that helps him settle. Probably disturb him even more. And he doesn't have the greatest width between the eyes. I'll leave him now so you can have a look at him and see what you think. As per usual, comments are always welcome. He does show that rather unfortunate sort of keyhole look on the face. I don't know if you can see that. What I mean is it's sort of got that wide at the top, riding round at the top like a keyhole has, and then fanning out into that sort of triangle shape at the bottom with that pinched little bit around the cere. It's not, you know, terrible, but it's certainly not brilliant, is it? I'll give you a few seconds just to see him. I'll move to one side. He's relaxing a little bit now. He does have quite a bit of width between the legs, which always makes him, when he stands like that, he looks really big and bold. Could do with standing like that, but more upright, I think. So when I look at him, his tail is, you know, stood on the perch, tail is almost touching the side of the cage. So that's sort of not the angle that I would ideally want. Right, so a normal light green cockbird. Well, before we look at the last few birds, as always, if you enjoy the episode, don't forget to give it a big thumbs up. And if you're not yet a subscriber, please do subscribe to the channel. And of course, I mentioned it as I've been going through the birds, and I'll continue to mention it as I go through the birds. If you want to comment on anything you see in the episode, then please do. Please let me know which was your, favourite couple of birds out of the ones that you've seen, and let me know if you think the ones that I am thinking about getting rid of are the ones that you would probably pick as the lesser birds. Right, let's crack on then and have a look at the last few birds. So this bird then is a cockbird, and it's an opaline yellowface grey, and again, I will need to talk straight away about the obvious fault, the ticking across the top of the head, that in this opaline actually looks really, really bad. And it is a fault that we have with opalines, and I say it whenever I see a bird like this, it's a major fault in the UK. It's quite a biggish bird, this, and does have plenty of spots. Typical opaline really, this bird, carrying far too much of the dark colour. There are a number of areas that this bird is, that I think will mean that this bird will not be kept, other than the ticking. You know, major fault, the ticking, so unlikely to make the cut. But he also, and you can probably see, is a pointy bird, isn't he? The shoulders, very broad shoulders, going into a small, narrow head. Doesn't have a massive amount behind the eye, not a massive amount across the top of the head. Quite a short bird. Yeah, this bird doesn't do very much for me, I'm afraid. There are times when it looks like it stands okay. In fact, generally it has quite a reasonable stance about him. And that would probably be the main reason for keeping him, should I decide to keep him, would be that he has a style that he doesn't have the hinged tail or any of that. I'll just see if I can get him to turn. And stands reasonably high on the perch, but even with the way he stands, the fact that it stands quite well, it still lacks that height. So I am inclined to think this bird will probably not make the cut. But again, let me know your thoughts. It does appear at the moment as if the yellow faces in my eye are not quite showing the way I'd like them to. It is a mutant one, yellow face. You can tell this from the fact that the yellow is very pale on the top, on the head. If it was mutant 2, you'd expect it to be much darker than it is currently. And there is no yellow coming down into the body either. I'll just stand back a little bit so you can take a look at this bird. If it will settle. Let me know your thoughts on this one and any of the other birds we're going to see. But generally speaking, I think this bird is probably, you know, if it was a hen, would I consider it a bit more? Possibly. But for a cockbird, not for me. I know it's pulling quite a bit in the cage, but still sort of lacks something. It's a very pointy bird. I know it's not showing itself brilliantly in the cage. We'll wait and see, I think. Anyway. I say, yellow face, opaline, grey. A very dirty looking yellow face, opaline grey. So that's that bird. So this bird then is an opaline cinnamon green cockbird. And again, one of the older of the birds we're going to look at today, bearing that in mind. And my immediate thoughts about this bird, even though it seems to be settled reasonably well in the cage, is that this is just not going to make the grade. It's a small bird for its age. When I compare it with some of the other birds that are either similar age or younger, has no width between the eyes. Spots for an opaline, I mean, they're not bad, but they're not brilliant, are they? Considering it's an opaline. I would as a redeeming feature, it's probably the fact that it has a little bit of a straight, as a straight back. So it's not an ugly bird, is it? It's not, one of those birds that you look at and go, it just looks, in terms of its style, it looks horrible. It's not like that. It just it's got no real size about him whatsoever. And it's a cock bird. Black blow, black size. There are better birds out of these young birds that, in terms of the length of the mask and the size of the spots. I know it probably has got a bit of growing to do, but I am not convinced that it's going to ever make it to the size of some of the other birds that we've got, that I've already looked at. And bearing in mind I don't keep a lot of birds, so I do have to, think about which ones I'm going to keep. I'm probably going to keep 10 to 12 cock birds, of which 6 possibly of the younger ones and 5 older ones. That's something like that, sort of split 50-50. And this won't, I just don't see this ever getting up there. I'm going to stand back and see if he'll settle. He's not been terrible in the cage. So another opaline. I do tend to. I know there's quite often a comment about steer clear of opalines because you'll end up with a shed full of opalines. Now I've said it before. I like the opaline, so it is a bird that I don't mind having in my shed. But I do have a lot, in terms of my overall, the opalines that I do have in the shed, I have plenty that are better than him. In fact, I think I've probably got some hens that have better blow and width between the eyes than this bird. I really am talking it down, aren't I? It's a pretty bird though, isn't it? Let's give him that. Make someone a nice pet, I would think. So an opaline, cinnamon, grey-green, I think. Let me know if you think it's just a normal green. I think that's a grey-green. When I compare them to some of the normal greens that I've got. And I know the cinnamon impacts that. I don't know, I've got it long before. Thoughts, as always, let me know your thoughts on this bird. The next bird then is this opaline cinnamon grey-green hen. stands really tall. It's very hen looky, so I'll just mention that first. If you have a look at the top of the head, there's not a massive amount across the top, but the stance, so its style, I like. It's very pointy again, so what I mean by that is it's got very broad shoulders, but the shoulders then go up to a point at the top of the head. You can probably see that from this bird. I would certainly hope you can anyway. The mask isn't really deep, but as per most opalines, it does have some quite nice big spots. Longish bird, and it looks longer because of the way it stands, because it stands upright on the perch, which I quite like. And I did say I was trying to get that sort of style back into the bird, that more upright stance. And because of that, and because she's a hen, my guess is that I will probably keep this bird. I will need to make sure that whatever I put it to has a very wide head. I'm currently stood next to the main flight and having a look in there to see what I've got in there that would complement it in terms of the wideness of the head. I'm sure I will find something when I do my scoring system and use the matrix, which I will cover in a future episode when we do an assessment of all of the birds in the shed and see which ones we're going to keep. I'll discuss it again, but there is a video on the YouTube channel that covers it. I think it's called Using the Matrix. So when I do that, when I then come to pair up based on that matrix, I will obviously find a bird that's got a really broad head. It comes out well in terms of width between the eyes. So a nice little hen. So as I say, stance is nice, broad shoulders, stands quite bold on the perch in terms of the width between the legs, and nice straight back and a straight tail, so there's no real hinging of the tail. And wing carriage is good as well. So overall, apart from the top end of this bird, which I know is what most judges go by, but apart from the top end of this bird, this is a nice stock bird, I suppose, a nice stock hen. And she's quite clean for an opaline as well, which is always handy. What I mean by that is there's no dirty patches across the back, or no major dirty patches across that, and there certainly is no ticking that I can see on this bird, which is a good start for any opaline. So yes, I think this bird is going to be a nice little stock bird for me. I'll just let you have a little look at her. Let me know your thoughts, as always. It's quite nice to get other people's views on the bird. I'll say that as I go through these birds, but it's always quite nice to get other people's views. And you have to bear in mind, of course, whenever I'm discussing my birds, I'm talking about comparing them really to what else I've got in the shed. So when I say it's quite a nice long bird, she's just starting to get a bit annoyed that I've got her in the show cage at the moment. So like I say, so when I say that she's quite a nice long bird, that's comparing to the other birds in my shed, of course. Right, so that's this opaline cinnamon grey-green hen. Now she is really climbing all over the cage. Time to look at the next one, I think. So this bird here then is a opaline cinnamon light green. and it's a hen. And whilst it's got real nice, or relatively nice straight back, as soon as I say it, she decides to clamber all over the perch. Let's see if I can get it down. Bear with me. She was sat earlier. There we go. So she's got a nice, reasonably nice straight back. She's only got half a tail at the moment, but that is growing back. She stands up well on the perch. She's got quite broad shoulders. Reasonably clean again for a opaline, although there is some markings on the back. Wing carriage isn't the greatest, I would say, not at the moment anyway. She might need to spend a wee bit longer in the show cage. In terms of the top end, sorry about that, in terms of the top end, she has reasonably broad shoulders, nice big spots, typical of a cinnamon, typical of an opaline, I've said that before. She has a little bit of width between the eyes, and she is quite high over the top. There is quite a rise over the top of the head. For a hen anyway, it's quite high. Again, I'll see if I can get her to perch again. There we go. So you can probably see it. She has got quite a rise over the top of the head, a reasonable rise. She's not the longest of birds. We have got bigger birds in this, but a hen might make a nice useful stock hen for me. I'm not sure yet. We will need to compare her with what else we've got. In terms of the number of hens that I like to keep, it's probably around about 15. So the obvious issue for her, I think you can, when she looks at the camera, you can probably see the extra width, a little bit of extra width she's got between the eyes. Not quite so pointy on the top end, but some of that might be because she's a slightly shorter, stouter bird, so it leaves an eye to it. Again, I need to really compare her with, when we do the rundown, compare her to some of the other hens on a side-by-side comparison to get a better idea. But you know, I suppose what we could use, or what we do use, I say, is the bars. So we can see how many bars there are between the eyes. Most people would like to see that there were, 2 bars. She's less than that, quite a bit less than that, I would say. But again, I compare it to my birds, not to what everybody else has got. Starting to get a little bit jerky again in the cage, although she sort of settles and then gets a bit jerky again. I'm just going to move slightly further away from the cage, so she's not necessarily always focusing on my talking. So an opaline hen, not the greatest of birds, but not necessarily the worst. We'll have to have a look. I'll just leave it as always. I'll just leave you to have a quick look at the bird. As always, do let me know your views. She has settled quite nicely now, hasn't she? For a bird that's not been in the show cage very much, she has settled reasonably quickly. On that subject of birds settling quickly in the show cage, so those of you that are out there that are budgie breeders and showers, do you make a note of birds that are natural show birds in your breeding records, just so you know, and you know, does that influence your decision on whether or not you're going to keep a bird? You know, if you've got two birds that are, you know, one that is slightly better than the other, but the one that's slightly better just is not steady in the show cage. Is one of these birds that climbs all over it or turns itself inside out trying to get out, and the slightly lesser bird is a good showy bird in the show cage. Would that influence your decision as to which one you would keep? Let me know in the comments. Well, that brings us to the end of another episode, a slightly longer episode than usual. Hope you didn't mind that. Next one's probably going to be a little bit shorter. Anyway, in the next episode, my intention, I think, is going to be to do a roundup of this year's breeding season within both sheds. In fact, not much to talk about outside, but we'll talk about how the various pairs in here did, and my overall view of that breeding season. But until that next one, as always, do stay safe, enjoy your birds.